Have you ever wondered what really happens after midnight, when most of the world is asleep? These aren't just stories. They're true accounts from people who worked the night shift and lived to tell the tale. But some never truly came back the same. Working the night shift might sound quiet and uneventful, but for those who've done it, they know that darkness doesn't just bring silence, it brings the unexpected. Tonight, we've gathered 4 spine-chilling true horror stories from people who were just doing their jobs, until things turned horrifying. From abandoned hallways to haunted warehouses, these tales are all based on real experiences. No over-the-top monsters or movie-style ghosts. Just raw, real moments when reality twisted into something nightmarish. If you've ever worked late, these stories will hit uncomfortably close to home. So turn off the lights, get comfortable, and prepare yourself, because once the night begins, there's no telling what might find you. Story 1: The Last Patient. It was a cold Tuesday night when Daniel stepped into the hospital for his night shift, unaware that this shift would scar him forever. The fluorescent lights flickered as he walked down the hallway, clipboard in hand, his steps echoing against the sterile tile floor. He had done this hundreds of times before, yet tonight, a strange unease lingered in the air. Room 409 had always been a quiet one, occupied by patients on the edge of life, but Daniel never expected what it held for him this time. The patient inside, an elderly woman named Mrs. Elkins, had been deteriorating over the past few days, her condition worsening with every breath. At exactly 2:42 a.m., her heart monitor flatlined, and Daniel made a quiet note of her passing. He whispered a soft prayer and stepped out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar behind him. As he made his way back to the nurse's station, the call button alert chimed suddenly from room 409. Daniel froze mid-step. The light above the door blinked rapidly, signaling that someone inside had pressed the assistance button. He turned slowly, confusion shadowing his face, and walked back to the room. The hallway seemed darker now, more narrow, as if the walls were pressing inward. He pushed the door open, and the cold air inside hit him like a wave. The room was silent. Mrs. Elkins lay in the bed exactly as he had left her, unmoving and cold. The monitor remained flat. Still, the red call button beside her bed was glowing brightly. He reached out and pressed it to reset the system, hoping it was a simple glitch. Suddenly, the lights overhead flickered violently, and the bed creaked ever so slightly. Daniel stepped back, heart pounding, and looked around the room. There was no one there, yet he felt watched, violently watched. As he turned to leave, a low whisper filled the room, so quiet he thought it might be in his head. "I wasn't finished yet." The words were clear, feminine, and raspy. He spun around, but the room was empty. Panic surged through him as he backed out into the hallway, his breath fogging in the now chilled corridor. He raced to the security desk and demanded to see the surveillance footage, his hands trembling. The guard hesitated, but upon seeing Daniel's pale face, obliged. Together they watched the black and white footage of room 409 from the moment Daniel had left the room. Nothing unusual happened for the first few seconds. Then the red call light suddenly blinked on. There was no movement on screen. No one had entered. The bed sheets didn't rustle. The door hadn't opened. But then something horrifying occurred. A shadow, indistinct and tall, glided across the far wall and paused near the patient's bed. It didn't come from the hallway or any source of light, just appeared. And when the call button glowed, the shadow leaned over the bed as if whispering to the patient. Daniel's heart raced, his skin crawling with dread. The audio recording captured the exact same whisper he'd heard. "I wasn't finished yet." The guard looked at him, eyes wide, and shakily reached for the radio to report the footage. But before he could say a word, the screen flickered and went to static. The recording was lost, corrupted. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He returned to room 409 at the break of dawn, and found the door tightly shut. A new sign had been taped to the frame. "Out of service. Maintenance required." But when he asked maintenance about it, they said they hadn't been scheduled for that wing. Nurses whispered rumors that strange things had always happened in room 409. Flickering lights, cold drafts, and voices that weren't supposed to be there. The call button kept lighting up at 2:47 a.m. every night for the next 3 days. Even though the room was empty, no matter how many times it was disabled, it blinked again the next night. Finally, the hospital decommissioned the room entirely. They sealed it off and moved all equipment elsewhere. Daniel transferred floors and refused to work the night shift again. But others began to report strange whispers echoing through the hallway near the sealed door. Visitors claimed they felt cold near the room, or saw shadows sliding beneath the doorframe. The hospital never reopened room 409. It became a ghost story among staff. But the horror was real for Daniel. He left the hospital within the year, unable to shake the memory. Some nights, he still wakes at exactly 2:47 a.m. in a cold sweat. His phone lights up, showing a missed call with no number. Just silence. When he listens to the voicemail, he hears the same words again and again. "I wasn't finished yet," over and over, until the message ends in static. He's changed his number. He's moved twice. But the calls keep coming. And room 409 waits silently in the dark for someone to answer. Story 2 Warehouse 13 Jason had been working the night shift at the old industrial complex for 6 months when he was first assigned to Warehouse 13. The building stood at the far end of the property, isolated from the rest of the facilities, rarely used and nearly forgotten. The air around it always felt colder, heavier, like the building itself exhaled dread. His supervisor gave him the key with a half-joking warning, "Don't let the ghosts get you," before walking away without further explanation. Jason laughed it off and tucked the key into his belt, determined to finish his rounds and prove himself reliable. As he approached the warehouse for the first time, his flashlight flickered, and his radio crackled with a burst of static before going silent. The giant metal doors groaned open slowly, revealing rows of dusty crates and machinery that hadn't moved in years. The smell of rust and mold filled his nostrils, and the beam of his flashlight cut through the thick dust hanging in the air. He walked the perimeter, clipboard in hand, noting inventory that didn't match the manifest, tools that weren't listed, boxes that shouldn't be there. When he reached the back of the warehouse, he noticed something odd. A door partially hidden behind a stack of crates. It wasn't marked on the floor plan. Curiosity overrode caution, and he pushed the crates aside to get a better look. The door was wooden, old, and scratched, with no handle, just a single keyhole. Strangely, the warehouse key on his ring slid in perfectly. When he turned it, the door opened with a chilling creak, revealing a pitch-black stairwell descending into the basement. He turned on his flashlight and took a cautious step down. The concrete steps groaned beneath his boots, and the air grew colder with every step. At the bottom, he found a long hallway with metal doors on either side, like an abandoned shelter. Most were rusted shut, but one near the end was ajar. Inside, there were restraints on the wall, an old gurney, and a pile of tattered clothing. It looked like a holding cell, but for what, he couldn't guess. Just then, he heard a whisper behind him. He turned, no one was there. But the door he'd entered through had silently shut. Jason rushed to the door and twisted the knob, but it wouldn't budge. He pounded on it with his fist, yelling into the silence, but there was no answer. Then he heard footsteps in the hallway. Low, deliberate, coming toward the room. He stepped back, heart pounding, clutching his flashlight like a weapon. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. A faint shadow passed under the crack, pausing for several seconds before disappearing. Jason didn't dare move. A low moan echoed from further down the hall, deep and guttural, like someone or something was in pain. Against his better judgment, he opened the door and peeked outside. The hallway was empty, but the farthest door was now wide open. A dim red light pulsed inside. He began walking slowly toward it, pulled by a mix of fear and curiosity. The closer he got, the stronger the scent of iron and decay became. Inside, the walls were covered in strange symbols drawn in what looked like dried blood. In the center stood a tall mirror, cracked and blackened. As he looked into it, his reflection didn't move. It stared back at him with hollow eyes and a twisted grin, even as he turned his head in real life. Then it raised a hand and tapped the glass. Jason stumbled backward, but the mirror kept showing that disturbing reflection. Suddenly, a blast of cold air shot through the room, extinguishing his flashlight. The mirror began to hum, a low vibration that shook the air. He could hear whispers now, dozens of them, overlapping, chanting words he didn't understand. One voice grew louder than the rest. "You opened the door," it said. "Now you must feed it." Jason turned and ran, sprinting down the hallway, up the stairs, back into the warehouse. But the layout had changed. The stairwell no longer led to the exit. It was a brick wall. The crates were gone, replaced by rows of identical wooden doors, each with a keyhole. He picked one at random and opened it, only to find another hallway exactly like the one in the basement. No matter how far he ran, he ended up in the same place. He was trapped. Every night now, he walks those endless corridors. Sometimes he hears his own voice calling back to him from the dark. Sometimes he finds doors with names of other workers who went missing. No one ever sees Jason again, but sometimes at Warehouse 13, the red security light will blink on at 3:33 a.m., even though the building has been closed for years. And if anyone checks the cameras, all they see is a shadow standing in front of the mirror, smiling with hollow eyes. Story 3. The gas station visitor Lena had only been working the night shift at the rural gas station for 2 weeks when things began to feel off. The station sat alone at the edge of a long, dark highway, surrounded by nothing but fields and trees for miles. Few customers came by after midnight, and even fewer stayed longer than necessary. She was used to the silence, the hum of the overhead lights, and the buzz of the old vending machine by the restroom door. But one night, at exactly 2:11 a.m., a white 1970s style car pulled up slowly to pump 3. The engine sputtered as it died, and no one got out. The station lights flickered just slightly, and Lena instinctively looked at the monitor above the register. The figure in the driver's seat was hard to make out, their face hidden in shadow, unmoving. Minutes passed. Still no one exited the vehicle. She grabbed her flashlight and stepped outside cautiously, cold air nipping at her skin. "Sir, everything okay?" she called out. No answer. As she neared the car, the lights inside flicked on, and for a brief moment she saw the person. Pale skin, hollow eyes, a wide, unnatural grin. But then the lights shut off again and the car was empty. Her heart leapt as she stepped back in confusion. There was no one in the front seat, no one in the back. She circled the car, but it was completely deserted, yet the keys were still in the ignition. She hurried back inside, locking the door behind her, her breath fogging the glass. When she checked the camera feed, there was no car at pump 3, only empty asphalt. But she could still see it with her own eyes through the front windows. Confused and afraid, she called her manager, but no one picked up. The screen at the register began to glitch. Static, then black, then a single phrase in blood-red text. "Don't look away." Her heart pounded. The lights overhead dimmed again, and when she looked up, the figure from the car was standing on the other side of the glass, staring in with that same wide grin. Lena screamed and stumbled backward, knocking over the impulse buy rack beside the counter. But when she looked again, the figure was gone. The lot was empty. The white car was gone too. No sound of an engine, no taillights, just the empty night. She reached for her phone to dial 911, but the screen was filled with static, as if the signal had been jammed. The station's landline buzzed suddenly, loud and shrill, causing her to jump. She picked it up slowly, pressing it to her ear with shaking fingers. A voice, whispery, gravelly, spoke one word. "Inside." Then the line went dead. She dropped the phone as footsteps echoed from the stockroom behind her. Someone or something was walking inside the lock station. She grabbed the baseball bat from beneath the counter and crept slowly toward the door, every step echoing like thunder. As she opened the stockroom door, the lights inside flickered violently. Shelves were overturned, boxes spilled across the floor, and written on the back wall in what looked like ash were the words, "He watches." Suddenly, a loud crash came from the restroom door, followed by the sound of something wet dragging across tile. She turned, heart hammering, as the bathroom light began to glow red. The door creaked open by itself. Lena backed away slowly, holding the bat out, but the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Then silence. Nothing moved. The power cut out. She stood in total darkness. Only her terrified breathing filled the room. Then behind her the radio switched on. A distorted version of a lullaby played, slowed down and backwards. She turned toward it, and he was there. The figure stood inches from her, that grotesque grin still plastered across his chalk-white face. But it wasn't just a face, it was a mask, and the eyes behind it burned red. Lena screamed and swung the bat, but it passed through him like smoke. He didn't flinch, just raised one pale finger to his lips, shushing her. Then he vanished. The power returned. The station returned to normal. But Lena was never the same. She quit the next day. But they say the white car still appears at Pump 3 at exactly 2:11 a.m. Workers claim the lights flicker and the monitors glitch. And sometimes they hear that lullaby again. Story for the morgue technician. Marcus had always been comfortable working nights. As a morgue technician in a downtown hospital, solitude was part of the job. Most people found the quiet of the dead unsettling, but Marcus found it peaceful. The bodies didn't talk, didn't complain, didn't judge. They simply existed. But on a particularly cold winter night, something changed. It began with a body that arrived at 1:03 a.m. No identification, no paperwork, just left on a gurney by an EMT who said, "Found him in an alley, DOA." The man was unusually tall, pale even by corpse standards, and completely hairless. His eyes had been sewn shut, but Marcus couldn't find a record of that being done post-mortem. Still, he followed routine, logged it in, tagged the toe, moved the body into cold room 4. That's when the first strange thing happened. The lights in the hallway flickered 3 times, then went out entirely. Only the backup lights glowed dimly, bathing the corridor in a red hue. He returned to his station, checking the electrical panel, no faults. But the security cameras began to loop footage from 2 hours earlier, as if time itself had rewound. Then came the whispering, faint at first, barely audible over the hum of the refrigeration units. It sounded like breathing, then a low chant in a language he didn't know. He assumed it was in his head, fatigue maybe, but the whispers followed him into every room. At 1:47 a.m., he heard the unmistakable creak of cold room 4's door swinging open. He rushed to check the monitor. The body was no longer on the slab. Thinking it had rolled off somehow, he ran to the room, only to find the gurney empty and the door ajar. Panic set in. He searched the entire morgue, checking every cooler, corner and room, but the body was gone. Then, on his computer monitor, a message appeared in red text. "You saw him. Now he sees you." The lights flickered again, and Marcus caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of the screen. Tall, pale, and walking upright. Marcus locked every door he could and grabbed the nearest scalpel. His only defense. He turned on all the lights, though they continued to dim and blink sporadically. The security feed showed static except for cold room 4, where the slab now displayed the words "Return him" etched into the surface. His hands trembled. He considered calling security but realized all phones were dead. He turned toward the entrance and gasped. The tall figure stood at the end of the hallway, unmoving. Its sewn eyelids seemed to bulge with pressure, like something wanted to burst through. Marcus backed away slowly, breathing in sharp gasps. The figure took a step forward without moving its legs, gliding silently. Another step, and another. Marcus ducked into the autopsy room, locking the door and shoving a metal cabinet in front of it. But then the lights cut completely, plunging him into darkness. He held his breath, hearing faint dragging sounds just outside. Then the hum returned, low and vibrating through the walls. The light above flickered back on for a moment, revealing bloody footprints on the tiled floor, leading from cold room 4 to the very door he now hid behind. A scream erupted from down the hall. Not human, not animal, something in between. The sound sliced through him like a scalpel. He realized this wasn't a corpse. It was something far older, wearing human skin like a disguise. Parasite of the dead. Suddenly, all the drawers in the autopsy room slid open at once, bodies twitching inside as if waking from sleep. One corpse sat upright, turned its head to Marcus and whispered. He chooses who follows. The lights exploded, glass raining down. Then silence. When Marcus awoke, it was daylight. The morgue was clean. No damage, no signs of chaos, and the tall man's body was back in cold room 4, motionless. But Marcus wasn't the same. He saw shadows moving without light, heard whispers through walls. Every night since, one more drawer opens on its own. One more body sits up. He's not working the night shift anymore. But no matter where he hides, he knows the thing from cold room 4 will come for him again. Because once you've seen him, he sees you forever. Conclusion: whether you're in a hospital, a warehouse, a mall, or an old hotel, the night has a way of revealing things the daylight hides. Maybe it's the silence, maybe it's our minds, or maybe there really are things lurking in the shadows, waiting for us to look away. These stories are all based on real accounts, real people, real fear. If you've ever worked a night shift, maybe you felt that chill too. And if not, next time you're awake at 3 a.m., just listen closely. You might hear whispers, footsteps, or even a voice calling your name. Just pray it's not calling you from the other side.